Hello, hello, this is the Lowland Kids Joggers tutorial with the paper bag waist hack, part 1. So to get started, we cut out all the pieces. I just wanted to explain these are the pocket pieces in rainbow, the pink is the binding, don't forget to cut that out. You'll need 2-inch elastic, and the only thing you need to do to be able to do this hack is add 2 inches to the waistband width. So I put my pattern piece down so you can see what that looked like. So let's get started. First thing that I like to do that kind of helps me visualize what I will be sewing is to place the pattern pieces in place and kind of situate them so that I know I do it right and I don't like put, the right pocket on the left side or something like that. So here's a little visual for you. The 2 pocket pieces go right sides together and then they go wrong side with the pant piece itself. So first we're going to put the front pocket pieces wrong sides together with the pant piece. We're going to be sewing along that edge, but we're actually going to add the binding along with it. I apologize, my video was filming on time lapse and I didn't realize that, so I had to slow it down so you could actually see what was happening. So the binding piece is going to be a little bit smaller than your pocket piece. That's intentional, but you will have to stretch to fit. So I like to pin to the top and the bottom, and then to stretch to fit, you just want to make sure that the binding is pulled taut, is the word I like to use. And so it's not stretching the pant leg at all, or that pocket curve, but that it is making the binding reach all the way in and have a little bit of stretch as you're going. The next part is kind of difficult to see since it wasn't very close up, but I'll try to explain it. You're going to kind of fold that binding up onto the back pocket, and we're going to fold it once, fold it twice, like kind of like rolling it over. The purpose in this is to hide that raw edge, and then I like to start in the middle. For some reason that works for me. As you can see, it's only pretty edges on both sides. But then I'll go to either end and I will just pin it down. If you don't feel like you need to pin it, then that's great. You can move along a little bit quicker, but I have noticed that sometimes my binding will curve as I go if I don't pin it, so I just like everything to be nice and secure in place. So for this next part, you're actually going to do a straight stitch. I like to lengthen my stitch. This is kind of like a top stitch, so whatever length you normally like to do for that, I like to do 3.2. It's kind of the happy spot for me. And then we're going to go ahead and do the other side. I let it go a little faster since it's the second time. But you'll see here the ease that there is. You'll see a little gap when I pick it up, showing that the binding is a little bit smaller and you're just going to stretch it to fit as you go. Once again, you're going to roll it once, roll it twice, pin it in place to do that binding. This is one of the only places where you're going to actually use a straight stitch. If you are using your sewing machine, be sure to always use a stretch stitch unless it's a top stitch like this. I like to use a zigzag. I like to lengthen my zigzag a little bit to a 2 for the length. Okay, so for this next part, we're going to be putting the pocket piece, the back pocket piece, onto the front pocket piece. We're going to be attaching them, just sewing right along the curve here. They are going on right sides together, and then once again I did switch to a zigzag. If you use a straight stitch, your stitches will pop. A lot of people use sergers. I actually don't have one yet. So any of my tutorials, you'll see how you can do all of these patterns with just a sewing machine. Just going to be doing the other side. And once I realized that I was on time lapse, I kind of slowed it down and showed you a close-up of what the final part of this pocket looks like. So you can see how the binding is top stitched. It's all tucked in, and when you flip it over on the back, you can see how the pocket is right sides together, and then we only sewed along that curved edge. And that is it for part 1. So we're going to take these 2 front pieces. You're also going to take your 2 back pieces, and we're going to sew them right sides together, but just along that crotch line in the front. And you're going to do it on the 1/4 inch seam allowance. And if you're like me and you're sewing on a sewing machine, be sure to use a stretch stitch. I prefer zigzag, and I like to lengthen my zigzag to about a 2. Once the front 2 pieces are done, then take the back 2 pieces, and we're going to do the same thing. Just go ahead and put them right sides together, and then we're going to sew along that crotch line. So the next step we're going to do is taking the front pieces and the back pieces and putting them right sides together so we can sew along the 2 sides, the legs. What I almost forgot was to pin down the pockets. I know not everyone needs to do this, but I do think it helps to kind of line things up so as you are trying to put the things in place, because that top pocket is going to line up with the back piece. And sometimes as I'm going, it kind of pulls out of place. So I like to pin them down just to make sure that my pockets aren't going anywhere and I don't get them all, I don't know, just out of place. And once you get all the pockets situated, go ahead and put the front and the back pieces right sides together, pin them in place. I'm doing a lot of pinning. I know people skip the pins, and sometimes I think about skipping them, but I was a little bit too nervous since I was making a tutorial. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and just sew that down. Everything's on a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and makes things nice and easy. I think I love sewing on a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Alright, and while you're there, let's go ahead and do the inner leg seam. I'm just digging in some more pins. Call me the pin queen. Okay, so I forgot to show this, but you're going to take the 2 cuff pieces and you're going to fold them hot dog style and then just sew them down, and then you can fold it over like I'm doing here. And this is so awesome because it gives a very professional look to these joggers. Like, it makes it look like it came from the store. And I decided to sew the cuffs by pulling the pants inside out and putting the cuff inside the leg hole. The other way is if you want to have the pants be right side out, then you're going to be putting the cuff around the leg hole outside of it. It's important to know that so that when you pull it out, the seam isn't on the wrong side. If you're not totally sure which way the seam needs to be, then just put your pins in place and pull it out to check, and it'll show you where the seam ends up. I've done it wrong before, so that's why I say this. Another thing I like to do is take the pant legs, find the 2 sides, maybe the front center, back center, and then do the same thing with the cuff. So you can just slip it inside, line up the 4 pins. I realized as I was sewing, 4 points was a bit much. I could have done with just 2. But like I said, I was nervous. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and sew this on a 1/4 inch. This part can be tricky just because, we're sewing for little kids and they have small, like little leg holes and armholes and stuff like that. So just do your best to not let any of the sides get tucked under as you're sewing. Just take your time. One thing that I do like to do is have my machine end with the needle down so that as I am stopping and going a whole bunch, there's no chance that my project, the fabric will get pulled out of place. And that way your stitch stays straight even though you're pausing a bunch. I don't know how people would do this on a serger. It would make me way too nervous. Okay, so once you have those in place, go ahead and pull it out. If you do put it in wrong, no worries. That is what seam rippers are for. And that is it for part 2. So the next part that we'll be doing is sewing the waistband itself. This time you're going to fold it hamburger style. I hope everyone understands these terms. And just go ahead and sew it in place. And then similar to the leg cuffs, we're going to fold it in half. I just pinned it down so that it was secured. Now this is the part that is the actual paper bag waist hack. It's really difficult, so pay close attention. Just kidding. You're just going to sew 1 inch in on the fold line. And one thing I will say is that this is a stitch that shows, but you are still on knit fabric. So I used a twin needle that would have stretch, but if you don't have a twin needle or a cover stitch machine, go ahead and do a zigzag stitch. You can kind of make it like a narrow zigzag stitch. And now I am working with Pin Princess here, who's playing with my machine, to set the waistband into or onto the leg, or onto the pants. And one thing that you do need to make sure of is that the top stitching is facing down, as like it needs to be the right side, so to speak. So you just want to make sure that when you do fold that waistband back up, the top stitching will be showing and not like the zigzag on the back if you end up doing a twin needle. And you're just going to go ahead and attach it to the pants. It's good to start your stitches in the back so that the overlapping stitches that you'll have to do won't show so much. However, you're going to leave about 1.5 inches at the end. Maybe even 2. I kind of wish I would have left 2 inches because I had one heck of a time getting my elastic in there. But that was a good thing, and it's because the casing that I made was just the right size for my 2-inch elastic. I like to put a safety pin on the end of my elastic to help thread it through. And once you do make it to the end and you pull it on out, that's when you will, look at me struggle. That's when you're going to take it to the machine, overlap it by 1/4 inch and sew that down. And be sure to use a stretch stitch. I think I went back and forth. I think I sewed over it twice just to make sure it was secure. It's probably not necessary though. When you go to stitch the elastic together, make sure the elastic isn't twisting. Okay, so once that is stitched, kind of pull it all the way into the casing. And what I like to do is actually move all the gathers towards, the front or wherever your, so that's away from the stitch that is still open. And that way you have like a nice flat part of the fabric to be able to work with. Very carefully go ahead and close that off. Still have the same 1/4 inch seam allowance, just don't hit the elastic. And be sure to backstitch as always. Once this is closed up, then make sure to evenly space the elastic within your waistband. One thing that I like to do is just kind of like stretch it and let it kind of fall into place like it normally would. So you'll see me do that after I situate it with my hands a bunch. Okay, so there I am, just kind of pulling it into place. And once I feel like everything is pretty evenly in place, I went ahead and practiced a narrow stretch stitch just to figure out which one I wanted to do. We're going to be stitching this elastic in place, and this is the part that really makes the joggers, in my opinion. You're going to need to figure out, just roughly measure where you're going to want to place the stitches so that it cuts the elastic in thirds. You're going to be doing 2 rows. And what you're going to do is pull it so that the fabric is straight. Do you see how it's totally straight? The elastic will be pulling inside. But try to make sure that the way that you're stretching each time is the same. You need to be holding onto it in the back as well as in the front. As you can see, I'm kind of guiding it along as I have stretched the elastic, but making the fabric, that word taut, just making it straight. My video did cut off before I was totally done, but you are going to sew all the way around it twice. And here is a close-up of what it looks like when it's done. So I did do a narrow zigzag. When I pull it, you can see that, but when I release it, you can't really tell, and I think that's awesome. And so this is the finished look, just to kind of give you a close-up look of it all. You can see how it's divided into thirds right there, and the double needle stitch above just looks really nice with it, and that's what gives you that paper bag look. And then for the fun of it, I just had to show you on my model. This is Millie, my almost 2-year-old. She loves pockets. Thanks for watching. Hope it helped.
Follow me on Instagram at Come Create with Kim to see more content.